Hi, I'm Betsy Yelmgren, registered dietitian with Feed to Succeed. Today we're going to talk about poop. Wow, that's a tricky subject. I talk about this all the time in my practice, but I find that families tend to have very different communication styles, and some families are very comfortable talking about bodily functions such as this, and some families feel really awkward and uncomfortable and don't talk about these things very often. It's important to be able to talk about digestive health. Everyone has occasional pain or discomfort, but it can be an indication of an underlying problem. For the most part, we can usually manage this with diet, lifestyle changes, but sometimes it needs a little bit of a closer look. Sometimes pain and discomfort with pooping can indicate a problem that needs to be investigated. Appendicitis, for example, which can be life-threatening but is easily treated, or celiac disease, Crohn's disease, colitis. These are all GI disorders that can also present with pain and discomfort and should be investigated. All of these problems can be treated and controlled when they're correctly identified. I do ask my patients about pooping. It can tell me so much about digestion and how they're tolerating different foods. For example, sometimes I will find out that poops are loose, liquidy, soft, and mushy. This can be an indication of a carbohydrate intolerance, and that's something that can be easily managed. Sometimes I see kids who are constipated, and constipation can cause a poor appetite. Feeling of a full, hard belly sometimes discourages kids from eating very well. Sometimes I get a referral for a child who's underweight or thin, and when we start talking about their pooping, it turns out they're constipated, and this can have a real negative effect on appetite. I see a lot of kids who are thin, and when we treat the constipation, their appetite improves and then they eat better. I've even identified problems such as fructose malabsorption simply from looking at food records and patterns of pooping. So what should we be asking? When should we be asking? Seems kind of unusual to just be asking our kids about their pooping every day, but there are some things that you can look for that might be an indication that you should ask a few questions. For example, is your child spending a lot of time in the bathroom? This might be an indication of constipation or something else going on requiring extra time in there. We also might wonder if a child's appetite changes, if you've seen any changes in their eating patterns. This might also be another reason why you would want to ask them about their pooping habits. So when would you know if it's time to ask your child about pooping? There's a few simple red flags that I think indicate an appropriate time. For example, if your child starts spending a long time in the bathroom, this may be an indication that they're having some discomfort or some constipation. Or if you notice a change in your child's appetite, they're eating a lot more or a lot less, you might want to ask them about their stomach and their pooping. The third time would be if they're complaining of abdominal pain or anything new with digestion. I would ask them also as a follow-up, how's it going in the bathroom? What's your poop looking like? How often is it? What's the consistency and the frequency? Family communication style plays an important role on how people talk about poop. I can tell pretty quickly what a family's communication style is right when they're in the office. Sometimes kids will giggle or look away. Sometimes they look down embarrassed. Sometimes they even get defensive and say things like, "What? I don't look at my poop. Who does that? Nobody looks at their poop." I find with the little kids, 5 years and younger, parents tend to have a pretty good pulse on bathroom habits. But as they get older, they tend to be more private about these things. So grade school, junior high, and on to high school, parents don't always know what's going on with their kid in the bathroom. How do you actually talk to your kids about pooping? My approach is simple. Just ask. If you look comfortable asking the question, your child will be more comfortable answering it. For example, with a 10-year-old, I might start by saying, "I'm going to ask you about pooping. This is going to help me understand how your food is digesting and how your tummy is doing." Once the stage is set, it's pretty easy to ask some open-ended questions such as, how often are you pooping? What does it feel like? What does it look like? If you keep the questions open-ended, you'll get less biased answers. With middle schoolers, this is an awkward age. Sometimes I have to be a little bit more direct. I might start with a question like, do you ever have any problems with pooping or digestion? But if I get a no, then I have to follow up with some more direct questions, such as how often do you poop? What does it look like when you go? If I get a yes, I do have some problems with digestion and pooping, then I simply ask them to tell me more. Usually by middle school, they can give me a lot of information about what's going on in the bathroom. And sometimes these kids have even already started to associate some foods with their problems. I've had kids say things like, when I eat ice cream, I immediately have to go to the bathroom. When I eat a banana, my stomach cramps. So at that point, they're pretty tuned into what's going on. There's a useful tool that you can find online called the Bristol Stool Chart. The chart has images of different poops and what they look like, and it categorizes them. Sometimes I find it helpful to pull this out, show it to a child, and ask them, which one looks like your poop? This shifts the focus off me, the speaker, to the chart, and you can then make the conversation a little bit more comfortable. After you get some information about poop, you can go back and work your way through the whole digestive tract, starting with the mouth. We have our mouth, throat, stomach, intestines. Ask about all kinds of things. Is there burning, pain, tightness, any cramping? Is the child having any bloating? Anything difficulty swallowing? These are all appropriate questions that can help them identify different problems. So, how does a parent know when this is a problem? If your child's been complaining of symptoms once a week or more for a period of 3 months, it's time to talk to an expert. I would start with the doctor. Make sure there's no underlying medical cause to these issues. If there's not, the next step is meet with a dietitian. A dietitian can help you identify things in your child's diet that you can make adjustments with to alleviate a lot of their symptoms. Hopefully this has helped you to understand why it's important to talk to your kids about their digestive health. Especially as they get older, they might be less likely to come and talk about pooping and stomach issues. It is important, though, to know if there is a problem and when it needs to be addressed. If you do discover digestive problems and think you might need some dietary advice, please reach out to us at Feed to Succeed. We can assess, we can help, we can provide education and support and get your child back on the right track. If you found this helpful, please like this video. That'll help other parents find it also.